Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Regardless of what time zone you're currently in or what you happen to be drinking right now, welcome back. And I'm Joe. I am your host, bringing the energy, all the burning questions, and maybe a little too much caffeine today for a sip and talk.
And I am here to be the brake pedal to that incredible enthusiasm. I'm the rational brain of the operation, the one who actually sat down and combed through all the dense material so you don't have to. Welcome back to the show, all our Sip and Talkers.
Sip and Talkers. I just love that name. It sounds like a highly educated, very well-hydrated secret society. The vibe in the studio today is actually super relaxed. I've got my iced latte, and you've got your, let me guess, the usual.
Earl Grey, hot, keeping it entirely classic today.
Classic indeed. But, you know, while we're sitting here totally chilled out, the topic we're bringing to you today is, honestly, anything but relaxed. It is explosive.
Yeah, that's definitely the right word for it.
It's a heavy one. We are looking at a situation that has politicians in Washington literally jumping up and down in frustration. And it's all centered on an island that constantly gets called the most dangerous place on Earth. We are talking about Taiwan.
Right. And specifically, we're not talking about military maneuvers in the ocean today. We're talking about a battlefield inside a building.
Inside the legislative yuan in Taipei.
Exactly. It's a political deadlock that has just dragged on and on into February 2026, and the stakes for this could not possibly be any higher.
Okay, let's paint the picture for everyone listening. I want you to imagine a massive, absolutely gigantic pile of money. We're talking about 1.25 trillion NTD.
Which is a staggering number.
Right. For our international listeners, just to put that in perspective, that is roughly 39.5 billion US dollars. That is just so many zeros.
It's a monumental figure. And you have to understand, this isn't just money for repaving highways or building a new public park. This is a special budget proposal specifically for defense. The official title is something like Strengthening Defense Resilience and Asymmetric Combat Power.
Which sounds like a title straight out of a sci-fi blockbuster. But here is the absolute craziest part of this whole situation. This massive pile of survival money is completely stuck.
Frozen solid.
Exactly. The opposition parties in Taiwan, so that's the blue camp, the KMT, and the white camp, the TPP, they have essentially joined forces. And they haven't just voted against the budget. That would be normal politics. They have actively blocked it from even entering the committee review stage. And they've done it 10 times.
10 times?
10 times.
I mean, that's not just a standard political rejection. That is a full-on legislative blockade. And that procedural deadlock is exactly what we're going to unpack in this Sip and Talk today. Because it's not just politicians bickering over, standard poke barrel spending. It's this massive structural collision between two incredibly valid but opposing concepts. On one side, you have national resolve, and on the other, you have democratic oversight.
Right. And while they are stuck in this endless argument, the clock is just ticking away. You have U.S. Congress members writing these furious, urgent letters saying Taiwan is playing with fire. And then just to the north, Japan is handling a similar threat in a completely different way.
Oh, absolutely. While Taiwan is paralyzed, Japan, under the heavy influence of the Sana Takaichi government, is just rapidly normalizing its military. They are boosting spending at breakneck speed. The contrast between the two is just stark.
So that is our mission for you today. We are going to completely dismantle the logic of this deadlock. We're going to examine the whole shields versus knives argument. And we're going to try to figure out objectively, does blocking a defense budget to demand to see the fine print actually make sense when your neighbor is literally standing at your fence sharpening a giant sword?
It's going to be a dense topic, but we will break it all down.
Let's jump right into the first part of this, the standoff itself. Let's get a bit technical for a second here. What exactly is this $39 billion actually for? Why can't the government just, put this on the regular national credit card?
Okay, so this proposal comes straight from the executive yuan, which is controlled by the ruling party, the DPP. They've put forward this special budget ordinance. And the key thing to know here is that it's an 8-year plan.
8 years. So this isn't just figuring out next month's utility bills.
Not at all. This is long-term military acquisition.
Right.
And that distinction is everything. The ruling party argues that modern defense procurement, things like building submarines or setting up complex missile networks, that just doesn't happen on a standard 12-month budget cycle.
Right. I mean, you can't just budget for a high-tech submarine in January and expect it to be parked at the local dock by Christmas.
Exactly. You absolutely need a multi-year financial commitment to even get the contractors to talk to you.
So what's actually on the shopping list here? Are we talking about big, shiny fighter jets to fly around at parades?
No, and that's a really crucial point. It is mostly asymmetric gear.
Asymmetric. We hear that buzzword all the time in the news. Can you break that down for the listeners?
Sure. So in military strategy, symmetric warfare is basically tank versus tank, fighter jet versus fighter jet. You match your enemy's strength with the exact same strength.
Okay.
But Taiwan knows it absolutely cannot win a symmetric war against China. The PLA has too many ships, too many planes, and honestly, just an endless supply of money. You simply cannot outspend a giant.
Right. It would be like me trying to outbid a billionaire at an art auction. It's just not going to happen.
Perfect analogy. So asymmetric warfare means buying things that are relatively cheap, highly mobile, and completely deadly to the enemy's expensive stuff.
Okay.
So on this list, we're talking about the T-Dome air defense system. You can think of it as a localized version of Israel's Iron Dome, but heavily adapted for Taiwan's specific mountainous terrain.
Wow.
They're also looking at the mass production of indigenous suicide drones and, crucially, follow-up projects for their domestically produced submarines.
So all of this is highly mobile, very hard to target, and basically designed to make any potential invasion incredibly painful and costly.
Precisely. The government is basically calling this survival money. Their core argument is super straightforward. The military pressure from the PLA is increasing literally every single day. If the legislature blocks this budget, it sends a massive signal to the entire world, and most importantly, to Beijing, that Taiwan simply lacks the determination to defend its own borders.
Okay, I get that side of it. Give us the money, the house is on fire. But we have to look at the opposition here. The KMT and the TPP, they aren't cartoon villains. They are elected officials with constituents. They must have a rational, logical argument for blocking this money. So what is it?
It is nuanced, and it stems from a very valid democratic principle, which is oversight. Let's start with the nationalists, the KMT. Their entire focus right now is on fiscal discipline.
So they basically want to see the receipts.
More or less, yeah. They are arguing that the current government is just using these special budgets way too often.
How does that work in their system?
Well, in Taiwan, you have the general annual budget, which gets strictly scrutinized line by line every single year. It has debt ceilings. But then you have these special budgets, which are essentially designed for emergencies. They sit outside that normal cap, and they allow the government to take on much more debt.
I see.
The KMT is basically saying, hey, you guys are using this special emergency loophole to completely bypass the normal, strict financial limits.
Okay, I can actually see where they're coming from. If I just kept opening up brand new secret credit cards to hide my spending from my family, that would be a massive red flag. Even if I was buying, I don't know, a totally necessary state-of-the-art home security system.
Exactly. That is their core argument. They are saying they don't want to just sign a blank check for 8 years.
Right.
They're proposing a totally different approach. They want to review the items one by one. For example, with the submarines, they're saying, look, don't ask us for 8 years of funding all at once. Ask for the money for one single ship.
Build one, see how it goes.
Right. Build it, prove to us that it actually works and doesn't sink, and then come back and ask for the money for the second one.
See, on paper, sitting in a boardroom, that sounds incredibly responsible. But does that actually work in reality?
In civilian construction? Maybe. You build one phase of a housing tract before the next. But in international defense procurement, it is a total logistical nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into the messy logistics later in the show. But basically, buying one missile at a time is mathematically the most expensive and slowest possible way to build a military.
Okay, so that's the KMT. What about the other party, the TPP?
Their angle is a bit different. They are heavily focused on procedural justice. They actually want to slash the budget drastically. They're talking about putting a hard cap on it at around 400 billion NTD. That's a massive, massive cut.
Wow, it's barely a third of the original ask.
Yeah. And they have a very specific political demand attached to this. They want the president to physically come down to the legislature and deliver a formal State of the Nation report. They want him to stand there and explain the entire grand strategy to them before they release a single dime.
So it's a total three-way standoff. The government is screaming about urgency. The KMT is demanding strict oversight. And the TPP is obsessed with procedure and massive cuts. But when we were prepping for this, you used an analogy that seriously blew my mind about why this is so completely stuck, the whole mom and baby thing.
Yes. This is absolutely critical if you want to understand the legal reality of this deadlock, because it's not just politicians being stubborn for the cameras. It is a literal procedural catch-22.
Okay, lay it on us. Explain the mom and baby.
All right, so think of the special budget ordinance. That's the actual proposed law that would authorize the government to spend this huge chunk of extra money. Think of that law as the mom.
Got it. Mom equals the law.
Now, think of the detailed budget book. That's the massive spreadsheet that lists the exact price of every single screw, every radar dish, every missile. Think of that detailed book as the baby.
Mom is the law. Baby is the detailed spreadsheet.
The opposition parties are currently blocking the ordinance. They are stopping the mom from being passed. In legislative terms, they are blocking her from even entering the delivery room, which would be the committee review stage.
Okay, tracking so far.
But here is their demand. They are saying, we want to see the baby first.
Wait, what?
They're telling the government, show us the highly detailed budget book. Show us exactly what you are buying down to the penny. And if we like what the baby looks like, then we will pass the mom.
But hold on. Can you actually have a baby before the mom is, legally recognized to exist?
Legally. Absolutely not. And that right there is the paradox. Under their laws, the government literally cannot officially compile and submit that detailed budget book until the ordinance that authorizes the budget is passed.
Oh, wow.
The mom has to exist legally before she can officially give birth to the baby.
So the opposition is sitting there saying, we absolutely won't authorize the law until we see the official details. And the government is throwing their hands up saying, we legally cannot give you the official details until you authorize the law.
Exactly. It is a totally perfect, unbreakable deadlock. To use a different analogy, it's like you hire a contractor to build you this incredibly high-tech, secure fortress. But you, the homeowner, demand to know the exact shade of the bathroom tiles before you will even sign the initial contract to let the architect start drawing the blueprints.
I am not signing this contract until you promise me the grout in the guest bath is eggshell, not ivory.
Exactly. And while you are standing in the empty dirt lot arguing about tile colors, the entire neighborhood is getting incredibly dangerous and winter is moving in.
That is just wild.
Yeah.
And that brings us perfectly to the next major piece of this puzzle. Because the neighbors, well, specifically Taiwan's very powerful friends across the Pacific Ocean, they are definitely noticing this dirt lot argument, and they are not happy about it.
Not happy is a major understatement. The view from Washington, D.C. right now is one of just severe boiling frustration. Back in February 2026, a letter landed directly on the desk of Taiwan's legislative speaker, Han Kuo-yu.
And who exactly sent this letter? Was it just some low-level staffer?
Oh, no. This was not a generic diplomatic memo. This letter was signed by 37 U.S. Congress members, and it was highly bipartisan.
Bipartisan, seriously.
Yeah.
Getting Democrats and Republicans to agree on literally anything in this political climate is like spotting a unicorn in the wild.
Right, which just highlights how severe this is. You had prominent Republicans like Senator Pete Ricketts and Dan Sullivan signing this right alongside key Democrats like Chris Coons. These are politicians who normally disagree passionately on tax policy, healthcare, everything. But when it comes to Taiwan's defense budget, they are completely in lockstep.
So what did the letter actually say? Was it politely worded, like, "Dear friends, we humbly request you pass this bill"?
Not even close. The tone was unusually harsh for international diplomacy. They explicitly warned that failing to pass this budget is completely stalling Taiwan's progress on building asymmetric warfare capabilities. And they used a very specific, very loaded phrase. They said, Taiwan is playing with fire.
Playing with fire. That's not a gentle suggestion. That's a direct warning.
It is. They stated outright that this massive delay is sending a highly dangerous signal to Beijing. But Senator Dan Sullivan actually went a step further in his public comments to the press.
What did he say?
He explicitly criticized the massive budget cuts being proposed by the opposition, and he referred to it as potentially kowtowing to the CCP.
Whoa, kowtowing. That is an incredibly loaded word to use in an Asian geopolitical context. He's basically accusing the opposition parties of actively bowing down to China just by stalling the paperwork.
It's a huge accusation. And it reflects this deep structural anxiety in Washington. You really have to understand the core American perspective here. The U.S. has a long-standing policy of helping Taiwan defend itself, but the underlying unspoken philosophy has always been this: the U.S. helps those who help themselves.
Right. It's like if I call you up and beg you to help me move out of my apartment, but when you show up with your truck, I haven't even packed a single cardboard box, you're going to be furious. You might just turn around and drive home.
Exactly. If Taiwan's own elected officials won't even authorize the funds for their own defense, the argument bubbling up in D.C. becomes very simple. Why should American taxpayers send billions in aid?
Yeah.
Why should American sailors and pilots risk their lives in the Taiwan Strait if the Taiwanese legislature is just treating this like a normal political game?
It becomes a massive issue of alliance credibility.
Precisely. Every single day this mom and baby argument drags on, the fundamental trust in U.S.-Taiwan military cooperation weakens just a little bit more. And it gives incredible amounts of ammunition to the isolationist politicians in the U.S. who are already saying, look, they don't even care about their own survival. Let's just bring our troops home and focus on our own borders.
And how did Speaker Han respond to this? I mean, he's from the KMT, right? The very party that's orchestrating the blockade.
Yeah.
That has to be unbelievably awkward for him.
Oh, it's a political nightmare for him. He is walking an incredibly thin tightrope. He basically issued a statement promising to prioritize the review process after the legislative session officially opens.
So a classic political buffer move.
Exactly. He's trying to absorb this intense, direct pressure from the Americans without completely alienating his own party base, who genuinely believe they are doing the right thing by demanding fiscal oversight. It is a nearly impossible position to navigate.
A tightrope walk in the middle of a hurricane. Now, to make this situation look even more jarring for Taiwan, we have to look at their neighbor to the north. Let's talk about Japan.
This is where the international comparison gets really, really interesting. Because while Taiwan is stuck in this endless loop of show me the bathroom tiles before we build the fortress, Japan is moving at absolute light speed.
And this is all happening under the influence of the Sanae Takekichi government, right?
Correct. In the context of 2026, the Takechi Doctrine is in full, undeniable effect. Japan is rapidly pulling its defense spending up to 2% of their GDP. And there's talk of going even higher.
Wait. Japan. The country famous for its pacifist constitution. The country that spent decades basically saying, no war for us, we're just going to build cars and electronics.
The very same country. But the underlying philosophy of the entire population has shifted completely. It has transitioned from a mindset of avoidance to a mindset of deterrence.
Can you explain that psychological shift for the listeners? Because that sounds massive.
It is a generational shift. For basically 50 years, the Japanese public firmly believed that peace came from being entirely non-threatening. The logic was, if we don't have a massive offensive army, nobody will ever have a reason to attack us. But after watching the reality of the war in Ukraine and watching China's increasingly aggressive maneuvers in the South China Sea and around Taiwan, that mindset just shattered. They realized that in the modern world, peace doesn't come from being harmless. It comes from being strong enough to absolutely terrify the bully.
So they're realizing that weakness is actually a provocation.
Exactly. They refer to this whole process as national normalization. They are deeply linking their military defense to the concept of national dignity. The prevailing argument in Tokyo right now is that Japan simply cannot maintain peace in the Indo-Pacific, and more importantly, they can't protect their own massive globalized economy unless they possess real devastating counterstrike capabilities.
So they aren't just buying defensive shields anymore. They are out there buying spears too.
Or at the very least, they are buying shields that are designed to violently bash back if you hit them. But there is another layer to Japan's strategy here that Taiwan is really struggling with, and Japan has just completely nailed it. And that is espionage and internal security.
Oh, the spy stuff. Let's get into that.
Right. Japan recently passed incredibly strong economic security laws, and they implemented a rigorous, strict security clearance system for anyone touching sensitive technology. Their underlying logic is brilliant in its simplicity. They say, clean the house first, and then arm it.
That makes total sense. I mean, why spend billions on a highly classified missile system if the technician installing it is literally emailing the blueprints to Beijing on his lunch break?
Exactly. Japan fully realizes that buying high-tech weaponry is completely useless if foreign spies are just stealing the operational secrets out the back door.
Yeah.
And this highlights a massive glaring gap in Taiwan's defenses. Taiwan still has not reached any sort of national consensus on passing strong anti-infiltration laws.
Why not? That seems like a no-brainer if you're under threat.
Because of their history, the opposition parties in Taiwan often frame these proposed security laws as suppressing freedom of speech, or they fear it'll lead to political persecution, going back to their authoritarian past. Meanwhile, the current government frames these laws as basic survival mechanisms.
Wow. So Japan basically managed to rally their entire country around this idea that strict security is actually a prerequisite for freedom, not a threat to it.
Spot on. So you have Japan actively cleaning their house and installing heavy deadbolts, while Taiwan is standing on the front porch arguing over the invoice for the lock and debating whether locking the front door is culturally offensive to the neighbor.
Which is just the perfect transition into the next piece of this. Let's look closely at the logic of shields versus knives. Because this is the primary talking point we constantly hear coming out of Beijing, right? That Taiwan merely buying defensive weapons is the actual problem.
Right. The Chinese state narrative is incredibly consistent on this. They publicly claim that Taiwan buying American weapons and Japan increasing its defense budget are acts of pure provocation. They argue that these defensive measures are the things destroying regional stability.
Okay, I have an analogy for this that I use all the time. I call it the neighbor analogy.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so imagine you live in a house. You decide one day, you know what, I'm going to install a solid security door. Maybe put a camera above the garage. Slap a deadbolt on the back door. Meanwhile, your neighbor, who, by the way, has been doing aggressive push-ups on your front lawn every morning and constantly shouting over the fence about how much he likes your living room furniture, this neighbor starts absolutely screaming at you.
Okay, painting quite the picture.
He yells, "You locking your door makes me feel incredibly unsafe. It is extremely hostile of you because it makes it really hard for me to come in and, visit your house later."
Visit.
Right.
With a crowbar.
Exactly. So the fundamental question is the person installing the basic door lock the aggressor in this scenario? Or is the neighbor who gets furiously angry about the lock and the actual potential criminal?
It's what analysts call the anger test. In international relations, and honestly just in daily life, a person who gets furiously angry just because you picked up a wooden shield is almost always the person who was secretly holding a knife behind their back.
Exactly. If you weren't actively planning to stab me, the fact that I'm holding a shield wouldn't bother you at all. My shield can't hurt you. I can't take my shield and throw it across the street to knock your house down. It's just a piece of metal.
And that gets to the absolute core distinction here. Defensive versus offensive capabilities. The weapons Taiwan is trying to buy with this frozen budget, the Javelin anti-tank missiles, the T-Dome air defense, the smart naval mines, these are purely asymmetric and defensive. They are literally designed to stop an invading force in the water or to destroy tanks that have already landed on a Taiwanese beach.
Right.
They physically cannot be used to invade mainland China. Taiwan is not trying to purchase a fleet of nuclear aircraft carriers to go sail up the Yangtze River.
Right, because there's literally zero chance that Taiwan is going to spontaneously invade China.
Zero. Absolute zero. And honestly, there is zero chance the United States is going to randomly invade China either. The human and economic costs would be astronomical, and there's absolutely no political will for it in Washington. The only scenario, the singular scenario where a shooting war starts in the Taiwan Strait is if China actively makes the decision to use military force.
So the threat to peace comes solely, 100%, from the side that refuses to put down the knife, the side retaining the option to attack.
Correct. Beijing is the only major player in this entire geopolitical game that has explicitly and repeatedly refused to renounce the use of armed force.
Wow.
So when their diplomats complain to the UN about provocation, what they're essentially complaining about is that their unilateral option to use violent force is slowly becoming more expensive and less likely to succeed.
It is just gaslighting on a massive geopolitical scale. Look what you made me do. You bought a deadbolt, so now I am forced to go build a bigger battering ram. It's your fault.
It really is. And to really illustrate just how deeply absurd this underlying logic is, we should walk through a little thought experiment.
I absolutely love this one. Okay, Sip and Talkers, I need you all to step into our mental time machine for a second. We are going to stay in 2026, but we are going to imagine a slightly altered geopolitical reality. The British Empire thought experiment.
Right. So I want you to imagine that tomorrow morning, the British government, the Prime Minister, the King, the entire Parliament suddenly issues a global declaration that the U.S. Declaration of Independence from 1776 is completely illegal and null and void.
They just get on TV and say, sorry, chaps, that whole messy revolution thing, it didn't actually count. Just clerical error on our end.
Exactly. They publicly claim that the Civil War with the American colonies simply never officially ended. And they state that London is the only legitimate recognized government of the entire English-speaking world.
Okay, so what do they actually do to enforce this?
They start flying heavily armed Eurofighter Typhoons directly off the coast of New York every single day.
Just buzzing the Statue of Liberty.
Right. They constantly cross the Air Defense Identification Zone of New England, and their state media starts releasing these incredibly high-budget, terrifying 3D CGI animations showing the Royal Air Force bombing Washington, D.C. into total rubble.
And what is their justification for this insane behavior? Why are they telling the UN they are doing this?
Their official diplomatic argument goes like this. They say, well, Americans speak English. You drink tea, well, mostly iced tea, but it's still tea. You have deep Anglo-cultural roots. Your entire legal system is fundamentally based on British common law. Therefore, you naturally belong to us. We are one big family.
Blood is thicker than water, guys.
Right. And then they say, and if you do not return to the warm embrace of the motherland peacefully, we will be forced to attack you to reunite the family.
The entire world would think Britain had completely lost its collective mind.
They would become instant global pariahs. The United Nations would be in absolute chaos. It would be universally condemned as pure insanity.
But, and here's the kicker, if you just change the word Britain to China, and you change US to Taiwan, and you change the English language to the Chinese language, it is the exact, literal same logic.
It perfectly highlights the absolute absurdity of what political scientists call blood and culture determinism.
Look that down.
It's the dangerous idea that just because two distinct populations happen to share a historical culture, a common language, or ancestral roots, that somehow gives one side the legal and moral right to completely nullify the other side's sovereign political existence today.
It brings me back to another analogy. The ex-partner analogy. It's like someone showing up at your house and saying, hey, we casually dated 75 years ago. We clearly have a lot of shared history, so you are legally required to marry me right now, or I am going to physically beat you until you say yes.
That is stalker logic. It belongs in a police report, not in discussions of political legitimacy. But the terrifying thing is, in the context of the Taiwan Strait, this exact logic has been completely normalized over decades.
We hear it so often on the news, we don't even blink.
Right. We're so incredibly used to hearing diplomats recite these lines that we totally forget how utterly bizarre and terrifying it would sound if you applied it to any other two countries on Earth.
It really puts that whole they're provoking us argument into a totally different perspective. Like, if Britain did that whole fighter jet routine, and the U.S. responded by buying more coastal defense missiles, absolutely nobody on Earth would say the U.S. is provoking Britain. They'd say, wow, good call. The British are acting completely deranged. Protect yourselves.
Exactly. The defensive reaction is entirely justified by the unhinged aggression.
Which naturally leads us into a really heavy concept that gets thrown around a lot. Unification. Because Beijing uses this specific word constantly. Peaceful unification. I mean, on the surface, it sounds nice, right? Harmonious, like a lovely family reunion at a park.
But we have to rigorously deconstruct these definitions because we really have to ask ourselves, when Beijing says one country, what exactly are they picturing?
Yeah, because technically, if this was truly just about forming one single China, couldn't the Republic of China, Taiwan's government, couldn't they be the ones to rule it? Or couldn't they dissolve both governments and form a brand new, massive democratic system together?
Theoretically, sure, if this were an actual merger of equals, like a corporate merger. But that is fundamentally not what is on the table. Beijing absolutely insists on one thing above all else, CCP rule.
So it's not a merger at all, it's a hostile takeover.
It is a complete liquidation. The ultimate goal isn't just to bring the Taiwanese people under a shared flag. The goal is the absolute extinguishment of the ROC as a functioning political entity.
Extinguishment, that's a dark word.
But it's accurate. This entire conflict is primarily about regime security for the CCP in Beijing. They simply cannot tolerate the existence of a highly successful, wealthy, Chinese-speaking democracy right next door because its very existence proves to their own citizens that there is a viable alternative to authoritarian rule.
And sadly, we don't even have to guess what this takeover would look like. We have a very grim, very recent historical example staring us in the face. Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong warning is totally unavoidable in this conversation. I mean, we all saw the grand promises made in the 90s, one country, two systems. They promised 50 years completely unchanged. They said the capitalist system and the democratic way of life would be fully protected.
And then we saw the harsh reality of the national security law drop.
Exactly. The loss of Hong Kong's distinct political entity immediately meant the complete loss of their specific way of life. The free press was dismantled, the massive protests were violently crushed, the educational curriculum was instantly rewritten to align with party ideology.
Right.
So when we use the word unification in the context of Taiwan, we desperately need to reframe it. If unification explicitly requires the violent destruction of a peaceful, functioning democratic government,
And if it's forced onto a population completely against the democratic will of the people actually living there,
then it is aggression. It doesn't matter if you try to dress it up in diplomatic language and call it a purely internal affair.
right, calling a robbery an unscheduled internal wealth transfer doesn't make it not a robbery.
Precisely. In the eyes of international realism, it effectively becomes an act of imperial conquest.
Okay, we've been hovering at 30,000 feet for a while now, talking about high-level political philosophy, historical analogies, and geopolitical strategy. But let's bring it all the way back down to the absolute nuts and bolts of the situation, because this all ties back to that frozen pile of money in the legislature.
Right, the logistics. Because frankly, bad logistics will kill you just as fast as bad philosophy.
Yes, and we really need to completely debunk what I like to call the Uber Eats misconception of national defense.
I love this term. Explain what you mean by that.
Okay, so I am incredibly guilty of this in my personal life. I treat Amazon Prime and food delivery apps like actual magic. I tap a button on my glowing rectangle, and 30 minutes later, hot noodles just appear at my front door.
It is a modern miracle.
It is. But that instant gratification mindset has completely warped how the general public thinks about military procurement. People honestly think, oh, if the war actually starts, if the ships start crossing the strait, the legislature will just hold an emergency session, pass the budget in an hour, and we'll just buy the missiles then.
Right, they picture someone picking up a phone and saying, "Hello, Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
Yes, hi, I'd like to order 500 anti-ship missiles, please. Can we get rush delivery on that? We really need them before the invasion fleet hits the beach on Tuesday morning."
Exactly. And maybe throw in a side of radar dishes if you have a coupon code.
But the terrifying reality is that it absolutely does not work that way. We are currently facing a very harsh, unyielding industrial reality. The global queue for military hardware is completely packed.
It's overflowing.
Look at the state of the world right now. You have Ukraine literally consuming artillery shells and munitions at a rate that hasn't been seen since World War II. You have the entirety of Europe desperately trying to rearm themselves after decades of neglecting their militaries. You have nations all across Asia doing the exact same thing. The actual physical production lines in these factories for critical systems like Stinger missiles, Javelins, Patriot batteries, those factory lines are fully booked, solid, for years into the future.
So it's basically like trying to get a table at the absolute hottest, most exclusive restaurant in the city on Valentine's Day, but you didn't make a reservation.
It's actually much worse than that. It's like trying to get that Valentine's Day table, but the restaurant only physically has one table in the entire building, and the delegations from Poland, Germany, and Japan are already seated and eating their appetizers.
Okay, that paints a very bleak picture. So what actually happens functionally if the politicians in Taiwan keep blocking this mom ordinance, this special budget?
Functionally, it's a disaster. If they block the ordinance, the Taiwanese military literally cannot legally sign what's called the Letter of Offer and Acceptance with the U.S. government.
The LOA. So basically the formal binding contract.
Exactly. It's the contract. And if you do not sign that contract right now, today, you immediately lose your physical spot in the manufacturing line.
Oh.
You don't just get delayed by the 3 months you spent arguing in Parliament. You get kicked out of line entirely and sent to the very back. So a political delay of just 1 month in Taipei could actually translate to a physical delay of 3, 4, or 5 years in the delivery of the weapons.
Because the production slot you were tentatively penciled in for just gets handed over to Romania or the Baltic states who actually have their paperwork signed.
Exactly. Which brings me to the fire truck analogy.
You are full of analogies today. Let's hear it.
Imagine you are sitting in your living room and you look out the window and see your neighbor's house is engulfed in flames. Or even worse, the flames are starting to lick the wood on your own front porch.
Panic time.
Right. So you grab your phone to call the fire department. But right before you hit dial, you suddenly stop and you say, "Wait a minute. I absolutely refuse to agree to pay the city dispatch fee until the local fire chief personally drives a car over here and shows me the highly detailed engineering blueprints of the exact fire truck they plan to send.
I absolutely must know the maximum water pressure capacity of the secondary hose before I authorize you to come save my life.
And I demand to see the receipts to prove the tires on the truck are Michelin and not some cheap knockoff brand.
By the time you finish having that completely ridiculous argument on the front lawn, the house is nothing but ash.
Exactly. And that puts the opposition's political demand for intense detail into a very harsh, very realistic light. It's not that wanting fiscal details and oversight is inherently wrong. Oversight is a good democratic instinct.
Right. Nobody's saying politicians shouldn't check the math.
But it's that the timing and the specific legislative mechanism of their demand is potentially fatal. Time is the absolute most expensive, irreplaceable resource in defense strategy. By deliberately stalling this budget right now, the delay is, effectively, a collective abortion of defense capabilities.
Collective abortion of defense capabilities. That is an incredibly brutal phrase.
But it accurately describes what is happening. You are legally killing the defensive capability before it can even be born in the factory.
It's just devastating when you frame it that way.
It's Realism 101. The world does not wait for your domestic politics to sort themselves out.
So, after taking all of this in, where does this actually leave us? Let's try to wrap this massive topic up.
I think we're at a very dangerous crossroads. The political debate happening in Taiwan right now isn't really a question of which party secretly loves the country more. I genuinely believe that the members of the KMT and the TPP love Taiwan just as much as the ruling party does. They don't want to see it destroyed. But it boils down to whether their specific political logic, the logic of stubbornly blocking the mom law just to see the baby details, whether that logic makes any sense whatsoever when your giant neighbor is actively holding a knife to your throat.
And it comes back to what you said earlier, which is just the absolute golden rule of geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
No one defends a country that won't defend itself. If Taiwan wants American aircraft carriers to show up, or if they want Japanese logistical support in a crisis, they absolutely have to prove they are willing to show up to the gym and put the work in themselves.
Absolutely. Though, to end on a slightly positive note, there is a tiny glimmer of hope. Speaker Han Kuo-yu's recent, very public promise to prioritize the bill once the session opens. It heavily suggests that the intense pressure from Washington might actually be working.
We can certainly hope so, because eventually the mom might actually be allowed to enter the delivery room after all.
Right, because at the end of the day, the color of the tiles in the guest bathroom really doesn't matter if the entire house has already been bulldozed to the ground.
Extremely well said. Wow. All right, Sip and Talkers, that was a massive amount of heavy information to digest. We went from the shouting matches in the legislative yuan all the way back to the British Empire, and from blazing fire trucks to imaginary bathroom tiles.
It's what we do here. We take the chaos and we connect the dots.
And we really want to thank all of you for sticking with us and listening. If you enjoyed this conversation today, if this Sip and Talk gave you some new perspective, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. We really need you in the club as we keep breaking these things down.
And hey, speaking of clubs and subscribing, we absolutely have to give a huge, huge shout out to our very good, very old friend, Mickey.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Mickey. Everyone listening right now needs to pull out their phones and go check out his YouTube channel. It's called Mickey to Life.
Mickey to Life, he just put out these latest travel vlogs, and they are just absolutely fantastic. Production value is off the charts.
He just has this incredibly unique, highly infectious Taiwanese humor that instantly lets you relax. I mean, after sitting here talking about missiles, budgets, and the threat of war for an hour, you seriously need some of that positive Mickey energy in your day.
You really do. It lets you see the beauty of the world from a genuinely fun Taiwanese perspective, which is just super refreshing right now.
It totally is.
Yeah.
I highly, highly recommend it. Go give him a sub and tell him we sent you. Thank you all so much for sipping and talking with us today. Keep your eyes wide open, keep your questions sharp, and maybe, just maybe, go double check the deadbolt on your front door tonight.
Stay safe out there, everyone.
See you all in the next one.